All right, looks like we're ready to go here. Welcome everyone to Workshop Wednesday. This month we are focusing on writing flash fiction. So I thought I'd write some flash fiction in the shared world we created a couple of weeks ago at the OnCon online anime convention. We don't really have a name for this setting yet, but it's a world of islands in the ocean that are tethered to floating sky islands, where the sea islands have advanced to a lot of sort of clockwork machinery and a relatively mechanized society. Although it's not high rises and androids, it's more clockwork mechanisms. And the Sky Islands are heavy on agriculture, a lot of land, nature. The people are more down to earth, so to speak. Um, and so there's this differentiation between the two. So I wanted to practice some flash fiction tonight, writing just some very short fiction, and I've been just to be clear, I don't know what I'm writing. Like I haven't planned out the story yet, but I am very drawn to the idea that on these sky islands where people are relatively poor or have low resources, that there are these little shrines out away from the towns that serve as kind of holy places, and that they are erected to honor nature and the forces of nature. And so I kind of like to tell a story around that. It's always hard writing a flash fiction fantasy because you're trying to get across the entire world in just a few words. But we're gonna give it a try. We'll see what happens. Um, and so I'm not sure. We're gonna see where that goes. My personal writing style is what I call the Pearl method or the shellac method, where I usually start with a seed of an idea, a little basis of an idea, and then I grow that through succeeding drafts. I don't like start at the beginning and then just write through to the end. I need to start with an idea and then write a basic outline and then kind of grow that outline and expand from there. That's what seems to work for me. So, someone is at a simple shrine. Um, Classic storytelling tells us we have to introduce some sort of conflict and resolve it at the end. Um, Perhaps they are attempting a ritual, and at the end it succeeds. The success is not what we expect, what the reader expects. Not sure if I want to do that or not, but I like the idea of a twist at the end. Um, well, at the end it succeeds. The ritual could also fail at the end, and imply some you have to come back and do it again, or something bad is happening. I don't know. So let's figure out our parameters here. Um, I don't want the ritual to be something massively powerful. I don't want this to be world ending. They're not summoning, the dragon that creates the world, created the world. But these shrines can be connections to something. Are they connections to actual spiritual powers? Are they connections to the dead? Are they trying to speak to somebody? Perhaps it's that. I like that idea. They're attempting a ritual to speak to their dead mother. Um, and it succeeds, but the protagonist does not get what they want, perhaps. Maybe they do. Um, the protagonist is surprised by the result. Let's say that the what they hear is not what they expected. Does the protagonist want to apologize to a dead parent? You know, I never said I loved you when you were dying, something like that. It could be something as simple as that. Let's go with that for now. Hey, Paper Dinosaur, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Hey, Johnny, I'm writing some flash fiction set in our shared fantasy world. Just as an experiment for tonight. So we're gonna start there. Which will see their dead mother, whom the protag never said goodbye to. The mother is, I want to be one of those things, I love you, I know, kind of a thing. Surprisingly to the tag, accepting. Let's go with that. So we're at a shrine. The protagonist, a young woman. It could be a child, perhaps. Somebody who is not someone who is normally supposed to do this. Let's maybe a teenager, a teen girl, is attempting a ritual that she technically is too young, inexperienced to do. Perhaps she's a shrine maiden. Perhaps she's a shrine maiden with who hasn't completed her training. The ritual completes, and she's able to say, "I love you," to her deceased mother, who replies, "I know." Something along those lines. We'll figure it all out later. From a Alchemist. Right, yeah, it's that kind of idea. So, okay. What are people named in this world? We don't have a naming scheme yet. I'm gonna go with Kira. Kira. I like Kira because it is a Japanese name that sounds distinctive. It sounds somewhat exotic, but it's not so strange that it's hard to pronounce or hard to understand. So it has a nice sort of middle ground between, it's not Sarah, but it's not right? So we'll start there. I'm also in favor in naming languages of going with something simple like consonant vowel, and those Japanese has this consonant vowel standard for its most of its syllables, which can give you a lot of variety, but it's a nice sort of simple pattern. So we're gonna go with this. Kira stands in front of a shrine. So this is not the full version. These are just, again, longer drafts. Stands in front of a simple stone shrine. Repeating the words she knows should work. Stuff happens around her. Mild supernatural stuff. The wind blows out of nowhere, that kind of thing. Happens around her. She's worried. Her training is incomplete. She shouldn't even really be out here. She'll what would be a reasonable punishment for something like this? a child would get spanked, but you don't expect a teenage girl to get spanked, unless it's that kind of a story. And you might lose privileges, something like that. Um, it could be sent to bed without a meal. It's usually something more social, more complex. Not here. She'll. Um, so we have an agrarian society. Returning to first principles, agrarian society, not a lot of resources. You could very well be sent to bed without supper because there's not a lot of food, ironically. Um, you could have possessions taken away from you, what few you have. I can't imagine a shrine maiden being prevented from doing her duties. Perhaps even disbarred from being a shrine maiden. She might be dismissed as a shrine maiden if the monk finds out. The head monk finds out. But she remembers the look on her mother's face as she died. Remembers the words stuck in her throat. Remembers the lump in her throat, unable to get the words out. This is good. More supernatural stuff happens. The ritual completes, and a spectral form appears in front of her. It just barely looks like her mother. Kira feels the lump in her throat again, but still calls out, "I love you." The form smiles. Smiles kindly and says, "I know, I always knew." Kira slumps down, crying. Okay. I think that's a good start. That's the basis of the story. Now we can expand it out. Kira stood on shaky legs. A few yards from the simple pile of stones that made up the local shrine, and spoke the ancient words of the ritual as tears streamed down her cheeks. The wind was whipped through trees. Through the leaves of the trees around her, the bare branches of the trees around her. Despite the dead calm of only a few minutes ago, the ritual The words continued to spill out of her mouth. No. She paused, forcing herself to think. Remember the next phrase. She paused. The next phrase of the ritual. Invisible, not there in her mind. Hazy in her mind, then forged, and finally remembered it and forged ahead. Would that be enough to break the ritual? She's not sure. She's only 15. Her, 2 years from the completion of her training. 14. Training. Halfway into her training as a keeper of the shrine. Call it that. She shouldn't be doing this. Would that small pause? She wasn't sure. Oops, she wasn't sure. She's only 14. She shouldn't have been doing this. She knew she shouldn't have been doing this. Past perfect always gives me problems. Doing this. But she shouldn't be. She shouldn't be doing this. She might be dismissed and disgraced if her master, if the I don't like the idea of there being like a head monk in the sense of this. It wouldn't be this large organization. It would be basically, the priest and her. If the priest found out. But she couldn't forget the look on her face as her mother died. On her mother's face. Mother's face as she died. She couldn't forget the lump in her throat. And her inability to get the words out, to tell her mother everything she meant to her. To simply say, I love you for the last time. The wind cut into the girl, let's call it the girl, into the girl's simple, it's gonna be like a kimono dress kind of thing, simple dress. That's a nice broad word too, so people can say, is it actually like a dress as in a garment of clothing, or dress as in the general word for clothing? Unnaturally cold. and she shivered as she pronounced the final phrases of the ritual. No, multiple phrases. The the wind howled and cut into the girl's dress. The unnaturally cold wind howled into the girl's dress. She shivered violently as she forced the final phrases of the ritual through her now chapped lips. The wind died, and the world itself seemed to pause. The carefully arranged pile of sacred stones in front of her began to glow with a faint blue light. The girl's heart leapt into her throat. The light coalesced into the faint outline of a human woman, her mother. The lump returned to the girl's throat, but this time she forced the words past it. Finally able to say it. I love you. The words seemed to hang in the air. The faint specter in front of her seemed to take this in. Then spoke a few simple words. Spoke in the voice the girl hadn't heard in what seemed like so long. I know. I always knew. Love you too. Love you too. I know. I always. I always knew. The glow faded. And now the girl simply stood in front of the stones. She crumpled to the earth, crumpled to the ground, sobbing. But for the first time since that day that her mother died. The tears seemed to be washing away her Grief? No. Light novel fiction? Maybe. It's just a scene. One single scene. The tears seem to be washing something away. Washing something away. Cool. This might turn into a novel. Who knows? A light novel. Let's view that not print layout. Can we get it all on one screen? Maybe. There it is. There's a short fiction. All right. So I need a moment to disconnect myself from the story, because it's very hard to critique a story when your mind is in it. So I'm going to pause here for a second. Again, length isn't important. I just wanted a quick bit of flash fiction. Good to get something, finished that quickly. They only took about half an hour. That's nice. Correct Charming Sketches. This is set in the setting we created during OnCon. One of the things I like about fiction like this is that it tends to nail down specifics. It requires you to think through details around what do people wear, what do people look like, how do they actually interact with things, right? That kind of thing. And now we know that shrine maidens are halfway into their training at age 14, and that there are shrine maidens and priests, right? Or keepers of the shrine, they're calling them that. All right, so the girl stood on shaky legs a few yards from the pile of stones that made up her local shrine, and spoke the ancient words of the ritual as tears streamed down her cheeks. I need to rewrite that. The wind whipped through the bare branches of the trees around her, despite the dead calm of only a few minutes ago. She paused, the next phrase of the ritual hazy in her mind, then finally remembered it and forged ahead. Then finally forced herself to remember it. I want that to feel anxious. Would that small pause be enough to break the ritual? She wasn't sure. She was only 14, halfway into her training as keeper of the shrine. She knew she shouldn't be doing this. She knew she shouldn't be out here doing this. She might be dismissed and disgraced if the priest found out. But she couldn't forget the look on her mother's face as she died. There's a bit of a punch. She couldn't forget the lump in her throat and her inability to get any words out. Her inability, her failure. Tell her mother everything she meant to her. To simply say, I love you for the last time. The unnaturally cold wind howled and cut into the girl's simple dress. She shivered violently as she forced the final phrase of the ritual to her now chapped lips. The wind died and the world itself seemed to pause. The carefully arranged sacred stones in front of her, sacred is unnecessary, began to glow with a faint blue light. Glowed with a faint blue light. The girl's heart leapt into her throat. The light coalesced into the outline of a human woman, her mother. The lump returned to the girl's throat, but this time, The girl's heart seemed, felt like it was leaping out of her chest. Pounded so hard, it felt like it was leaping out of her chest. The lump returned to the girl's throat. Okay, cool. I didn't, the heart comes into her throat, but then the lump returns to the girl's throat. Weird symmetry there. This time she forced the words past it, finally able to say it. I love you. I love you, she called out. The words seemed to hang in the air. The faint specter in front of her seemed to take this in, then spoke in the voice the girl hadn't heard in what seemed like so long. No. I was going to give it an attribute, the kind voice, but I want this to be generic. I want it to be just any mother's voice. Saying, I know, I always knew. The glow faded. Now the girl stood in front of the stones. Stood in the small clearing. Small clearing in front of the stones. Sobbing. Since that day their mother died, the tears seem to be washing something away. I like that ending. That's a solid ending. Thanks. Yeah. Hey, Christian. Yeah, I've written a few things, not had much success with them, which is kind of the nature of fiction writing. But that's all in the past. So I'm not crazy about this first sentence. You know, you want the first sentence to hook the reader. You want something about that first sentence to intrigue the reader, if at all possible, especially in flash fiction. And here, tears streaming down her cheeks is kind of the hook, and it comes at the end. So, as tears streamed down her cheeks, the girl stood on shaking legs, a few yards from the pile of stones that made up her local shrine. So, from the pile of sacred stones, and stumbled through the words of the ritual, and continued to stumble her way through the words of the ritual. On her cheeks, the girl stood on shaking legs a few yards from the pile of sacred stones, and continued to stumble her way through the words of the ritual. That's not bad. It's a fairly long first sentence. There's a lot going on there. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The girl stood on shaking legs a few yards from the pile of sacred stones, stumbled her way through the words of the ritual. Legs. She continued her I'd like to get across the idea that she's in this difficult emotional state. She the words of the ritual continued to tumble out of her mouth. That's better. The words of the ritual continued to tumble out of her mouth. The wind whipped through the bare branch. No, she probably hated in her mind that finally forced herself. Something looking forward to head. A small pause here for the ritual. She wasn't sure. She didn't know. That's better. More firm. She didn't know. She's only 14. I'd like to get across the idea that the ritual or the training is multiple years long, but I think being 14 implies she's obviously young to some extent. Be out here doing this. She went to Smith's and disgrace. The priest found out, but she couldn't get the look on her mother. She died. She couldn't get the look. Any words out. Her failed her mother. She meant to work. Didn't say that last time. Cut. Yes, she suffered violently as she forced the final phrases of the ritual through her now chapped lips. Stood shivering in the small clearing in front of the stones. These physical processes should continue, right? She should still be cold. Great sobs pouring from her sore throat. That was that day that the tears seemed to be washing something away. Cool, that's better. I'm trying to make a through line through all those things. Crumbling sacred stones since she's broken. I like that. Good idea, Gorilla. From the do we want the sacred? So I don't want the sacred stones to like break when she does this, because that would imply that they're fairly fragile magically. But should they be sort of a jumble at the beginning of the story, or should we focus on the fact that they are this seemingly random jumble at the end of the story? Except that she's healing herself at the beginning of the story. From the so I think it makes sense that at the beginning of the story we emphasize the fact that they are forged ahead, staring forged ahead. She stared at the seemingly. She stared hazily at the no. She somewhat groggy at the seemingly at the. I like the idea the stones are broken. That's an interesting that this is a feature of the shrines, that there's something broken about them. You don't just set up something that is this beautiful natural thing, that there is some brokenness to them. That's just a neat world detail. At the stones, at the don't say take a we're just gonna do it this way. That's better. A few yards from the pile of sacred broken stones. Boom. That tells the reader what they need to know. It adds this sort of question to their mind: why would broken stones, be sacred? But you can just kind of ask that question as you're going along, and it doesn't need to be answered. It's a world detail. That's nice. The carefully arranged, the shattered stones in front of her glowed with a flame. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Perfect. Haha, I love it. Cool. We've written some flash fiction. All right. I'll go ahead and post this in the Discord, and this will be a bit of a fiction that we can use as a basis for the shared world. And if other folks want to add more, certainly they can. But this feels good. So to reiterate, again, my process is I have to go in stages. I have to start with an idea and then expand that into a very simple plot concept, and then expand that until I'm kind of close to the I'm maybe a quarter of the size of the actual story, and then I write the story from there because I have enough beats, enough pieces to just flesh each of those out as I'm writing, and that came out pretty well. I'm quite happy with that. Cool. Thank you all for your suggestions as always. I'm glad to hear that, Charmy. Look forward to seeing what you've written, and I think that'll do it for right now. I think I'm going to try every Wednesday night to get online and write something. It's kind of a similar thing. Let's just start with have some idea, but not plan anything out initially, and kind of work through it live on stream and figure out what I want to do with that story as we go. I keep forgetting that this is the camera, not that one. So thank you all. That'll do it for tonight, and yeah, until next time, make something.